Hey, good morning. Here we are. We made it. We made it here. I'm so excited to be on stage with these wonderful women. Also, this is a WANL. I don't know if you guys know what a WANL is. All women. Yeah, we have Lucinda Shen from Axios. We have Nicole Goodkind from CNN and Emily Nicolle from Bloomberg. And I'm Steph Alinsug, CMO of Friends with Benefits. And actually, I should just say really quick, if anyone has questions that you want to ask, you can scan, there's a QR code somewhere here, and it'll come right to me, so feel free to do that if you have any questions. And yeah, this is covering crypto for the mainstream, but I think we're actually going to broaden the scope of this conversation a little bit, because it turns out that some of the core audiences that you all speak to is actually the industry itself, or crypto Twitter, as we like to say. And of course, there's overlap between these two audiences, right? But they still have specific needs on how we speak and tell stories. And part of actually why I'm excited for this conversation is that reporters often obscure themselves behind the stories, right? But I think it's really important to hear from the people who are telling our stories. And so with that, I'm going to throw it over to you, Nicolle. In our prep for this conversation, you said this thing about wanting to humanize the technology, and it really stuck with me. And so I'm curious if you could just elaborate on that a little bit more.
Yeah, we want to hear about the stack and all the details that go into the tech, but what really grabs someone and makes them pay attention, especially for a broad audience like we have at CNN, is something that they can grab onto and connect to right away. So what is the through line? What motivated you to start your company or to work on your project? We want the kind of motive behind there, and then we can get into the detail of it all. I think people need to click on something for a reason. We're not trying to make clickbait, but we're trying to meet our readers where they are, or our viewers where they are, and connect with them there. So, I think about a story I wrote back when I was at Fortune magazine, and it was a profile of Roham Garagazlu, who is at Dapper Labs. And it was, he was very big into the NFT world at the time. And we were getting a lot of the tech, a lot of things that he was launching that he wanted to talk about. But what really grabbed me was when he started talking about the gaming world, and how games are actually a really great introduction to new technologies for people. So he talked about how Web 2.0, the Facebooks of the world, really became popular because of Farmville. I think that's the name of the game, and how that's what he was doing for Web 3.0 and beyond that. So I think just kind of grabbing onto that through line, grabbing onto something that people can relate to is really important. Kind of getting some sort of face behind the technology is, at least for me, what I really want to focus on, and what I like to read and watch on my own as well.
Yeah, and I mean, we have probably mostly technical folks at this conference, and I hung out the Builders Bridge a bit yesterday, so the developer stage. And there's a lot of jargon being thrown around, and me as a narrative marketer in the space, I have probably 85% legibility on everything that's being said. But as reporters, both speaking to the industry and then to a mainstream audience, how do you navigate the constantly emerging jargon? I mean, the industry moves so fast. It's kind of by design of emerging tech. And so yeah, Lucinda, I'm going to throw this question to you. And how do you feel about navigating all the jargon, and how can we as industry builders help you communicate this to a wider audience?
Yeah, so I've been covering this space since probably 2017, and I've seen a lot of terminology get passed around, and I'm sure everyone here has a sigh of pain and suffering when they've dealt with some of the terms that have come through, right? Like there's been, I think it was distributed ledger was a popular term. Folks in banks wouldn't take crypto as a name. Then it became blockchain, and now crypto is a dirty word, and it needs to be back to blockchain. And so within this community, I think folks understand that there are slight distinctions in between those, but for the larger audience, if you're trying to speak to the mainstream, if you're trying to speak to your mother, to the Gen Zs, that your cousin, think about it like that, I don't think they'll understand that difference. And so I think a lot of it needs to be simplified in that sense. I think the second part to that is at least for folks who are within this more technical side of the industry, you want to know what kind of coverage you want at least, right? Because if you're trying to talk to someone, if you're trying to talk to other developers, being technical is perfectly fine. They'll understand exactly what you're talking about. They'll be super excited. If you want a more mainstream crowd, if you want to talk to the politicians, they might understand. You have to really go dig into the basics of what this means. You need to be able to talk about why securitization, tokenization is so important, why tokenized deposits makes more sense for banks than in the long term. And all of that needs to be in very, very simplified terms.
Yeah, and I think actually I'd love to jump to you said something here about like how crypto has become sort of a dirty word, and I joined the industry about 3 years ago, and my handle at the time on Twitter was Crypto Honey. It's like a play on CryptoPunks, and but earlier this summer I took crypto out of my handle and just went over straight to something else, and it was kind of a big deal. Like people on my side on the culture side were just like, oh my God, crypto is dead. Like Crypto Honey is no longer Crypto Honey, and I made this joke about how I killed her. And yeah, I mean, from where I sit on the culture side, I think crypto has a brand problem, and I think crypto has a really bad narrative problem. And of course, as reporters and people who are making the media, and then me as a marketer, it's like we have this we're in this constant dance of how we position the industry, how we talk about the industry. And yeah, I guess I'm just going to kind of throw it out to the three of you. Like, what do you think about that? Do you think crypto has a brand problem?
Sorry, not to take over again. I mean, I think you guys have just crypto in general right now has a pretty big benefit in the sense that y'all have a lot of money. Like if you're just talking about the US alone, the biggest super PAC right now that anyone can tell is a crypto super PAC. It actually doesn't talk about crypto a lot, but even with that, even given that it's able to move the narrative on a regulatory level in the US, and that's huge, right? And I don't need to be the one who says this. I'm sure everyone else already knows this. The US regulatory system defines a lot of what goes on. It becomes kind of a bellwether for other industries in other countries, other financial industries in other countries. So even, I think, without the media conversation, there is a tailwind that's happening already here.
Yeah, I think if anything, it's maybe a sign of a maturing industry too, right? It's not singled out as this thing, crypto anymore. It's now kind of part of a larger narrative. And so, maybe the term is maligned, but it's actually potentially a good thing for digital assets in general.
I mean, I kind of disagree in that I don't think that crypto is a dirty word. I feel like partly the industry has moved beyond that in the last year. There's been a lot of strides that the industry has taken to kind of redeem itself in many of the regards that held it back when it comes to collapses of things like 3 Arrows Capital or FTX. And so it has done a lot of work in that regard, especially when we have regulatory regimes now coming in for crypto. So very soon, going into 2025, in Europe, there'll be a full framework for crypto, and it will be a regulated industry. And so there's ways in which that crypto is no longer, I guess, a dirty term. But there definitely is a reputational rehab that has happened. And whether or not, I guess, you would choose to become Crypto Honey once again is up to you.
Digital assets, honey. Maybe that's what's next. Yeah, and I guess I'm curious, like, as you've, right, you said digital assets, you moved from crypto to blockchain, there's Web3, but then also as other emerging tech industries kind of come into the limelight, AI, machine learning, all this, how have you seen your approach to reporting on the industry shift over time as well, especially as you have like competing markets emerge?
I think our bar is a lot higher than it used to be, especially like if you look at Bloomberg as an institution, the way that we cover crypto, we set up the crypto team in October 2021, which is a month before the last Bitcoin high. And so that meant that we were kind of there at the beginning of, at the peak of the zeitgeist as it was then, NFTs and all the rage and everything like that. And we were also there to chart the downturn that followed. And so the kinds of stories that we were able to do back then were very kind of pop culture because everybody was in it. You had celebrities all over the place. And then now as we look at crypto, it's very much like, what are you doing that is different? What is new? We're all still waiting for that next big thing to pop up in this bull market that is akin to the NFTs of the last one. And so the bar for reporting on new developments and new products is so much higher than it was back then.
I agree with that. I think that the bar is absolutely higher. I've noticed a shift. Fortune was scrambling to hire an entire crypto team around the time that I left there, which is 2021, 2022. And at CNN we had 2 dedicated crypto reporters. We don't have that anymore. And now, the huge focus is on AI, and now we have a few, dedicated AI reporters. And I think that things have kind of been folding into each other. So there's that. But again, and I think it is ultimately a positive thing. We're covering crypto in the same way that we might cover any other financial asset. There's a high bar for coverage, and it has to be a newsworthy or a story or some sort of public interest story that really grabs readers' attentions. And yes, it's harder to get that coverage, but it also means that we're not kind of looking at this as intensely as we were and trying to maybe find stories that could be negative. So it's ultimately, I think, a positive thing.
Yeah, I mean, I would just say, I think the underlying theme through a lot of this conversation, one of the first things that I was taught in J school, which is a dying thing apparently, but one of the things I was taught in J school, and that always sticks with me, is journalism is at the end a business. We're all in for-profit companies here on this panel, and so as the current market is, a lot of folks, if you've ever done fundraising, you've probably lost a round or an investor to another AI company in the last 12 months. And so a lot of our coverage in the last 12 months has also shifted. A lot of that has gone from, like Nicolle was mentioning earlier, from crypto into AI. Of course, there are also crypto companies now chasing AI as well. And so I think if you are thinking about, if you have a journalist on the other side of your email, the other side of the table, it's worth remembering that some of the kind of business economics are also impacting the way that coverage is being shaped.
I think it's also, you mentioned celebrities. It's important to point out that for the majority of celebrities associated with crypto, there was clearly a bit of a controversy around that. And so that's no longer there, but I also think that's a good thing, because then we can actually focus on the business leaders and developers and kind of feature them, as opposed to just these kind of A-list names that vie for our attention, that we're interviewing just because we want that name in the headline, right? We can actually get to the news.
Yeah, and I will point out that while a lot of crypto media has slimmed down in the last 2 years, partly because at the trade publications especially, their fortunes are tied to the fortunes of the industry, and so with the industry declining, so too did their budgets. At Bloomberg anyway, that isn't the case. Our team is as big as it was on day one. We still have just as many people all around the world, all covering crypto, and it's only that the way in which we cover it has changed. We do a lot more stories that are about, if we see a bunch of companies all doing a similar thing, that will be in one piece noting the trend, rather than individual announcements on products.
I'm actually a J school dropout myself, so
I never went.
Oh, there we go.
I've never been professionally trained in journalism.
I mean, yeah. I've never been professionally trained in marketing either, so here we are.
Yeah.
Yeah, and I think actually, I'm gonna come back to something you said, Lucinda, in a minute, but I want to talk about the relationship between people in the industry, between crypto builders, emerging tech builders, and the media. Because even as a marketer, it's still a pretty gold standard for me to have either trade publication or even just any sort of digital media outlet give us a mention. And so it still matters, right? Even though we might have completely downgraded the role of something like a press release, sort of press relations are still really important. But there is a fear of talking to journalists. Will you say the wrong thing? Is legal going to have to get involved? We were just talking about this in the green room. And yeah, I guess I want to throw this over to you. How would you sort of talk to this audience about how we can be in better relationship with our media, who are telling the stories that are critical to our success?
I think especially when you start speaking to journalists at mainstream outlets like ours, so little of what we write comes from a press release. I mean, like most of the stories that I write come from having meetings with people, learning what they're working on, learning about what they think are the important issues that people should be writing about, and building from there. And we can only do that if you meet with us and talk with us. And I can only speak for myself, obviously, but I'm like, conversations don't always have to be on record. We're willing to have conversations on background, and I want sources always to feel like it is a two-way street. It's not just journalists dictating at you what is about to happen. It is, you have a lot of power yourself as a source, and we would never want to have a relationship where you felt uncomfortable or that you didn't know what was going to come out. One thing that we advocate at Bloomberg is no surprises journalism. If we publish a story and it involves you or names you, you know about it beforehand, and you should know what it's about to look like. Anybody else?
Yeah, I mean, we take a similar approach. Yes, take as many coffee meetings, take as many dinners. They're not always going to end up being a story, but we're learning from you. And not just as a source, like not every single conversation is we're trying to extract information out of you about your company or what you're doing. Sometimes it's asking you what you want as a reader. Like I send out a newsletter every morning, and not every day do I get a response back. Even if it's like, I fucking hate this. Sorry, am I allowed to say that? I absolutely hate this.
We'll find out.
We love that feedback. Yeah, cut that. Sorry, but all of that, I think, even if you're just telling us, I don't agree with you, starting a dialogue, any of that is really helpful.
And you have to remember, we don't work in blockchain. Most of us don't come from a crypto background. We've not worked for a crypto company. So the way in which we learn how your business works, how your products work, how L1s work, L2s, token launches, like we learn that from talking to people. And if you don't allow us to kind of learn those things from you, then that's what creates pieces that then don't chime with what crypto looks like in reality.
But remember that you're on the record when you're talking to a journalist, unless you state otherwise.
Unless we say otherwise.
I think that as the industry has evolved, I remember going to crypto conferences just a few years ago where people really didn't understand, even though it said, CNN very large. I don't have my pass on, but on the pass on my chest, people would say things and I would be shocked. I wouldn't report on it because I didn't want to hurt them, but I think that there was some sort of education. And then from there, it turned into this kind of animosity, and I think a lot of people in the industry didn't trust reporters and didn't like that. Now I think we've reached some sort of reciprocal understanding, which just happens as industries mature. But yeah, just remember, unless you say, you're on the record, or you're off the record, you're on the record, you always clarify what going on background means, because it can mean different things to different people, and just be savvy. But that being said, I think that what you said is very true. We're not, especially I think kind of larger outlets, we're not trying to hurt you. We want to talk to you. We want to understand what you're doing. We're kind of in a mutual relationship here, right? We're not trying to get you. And yeah, CNN will absolutely reach out to you for comment and talk to you about a story before it comes out. So there isn't going to be that kind of a gotcha situation.
Yeah, I was talking with someone recently in a friendly setting, and he works in tech. He's not in crypto. He pulled out his phone and showed me a LinkedIn message, and he was telling me in like a very disgusted tone that a journalist had reached out to him to ask him about something, and the journalist had offered him like on background and off the record. I'm obviously biased as a journalist. I would. It seemed to me that he was being colored by kind of some of the distrust that had been happening within the tech journalism world for a while. My take on this kind of stuff is if you're being reached out to, or at least my plea is if you're being reached out to, it's not necessarily because we have a negative story on you. Sometimes I'm just trying to understand, is this a good company? You've heard more about some of these enterprise blockchains than we have. I'm not a developer. Sometimes I'm just getting your word on the street and polling you for something. You can dictate whether or not you get quoted, right? We can talk on background, on record. Yeah. Like the other panelists were saying, all of that is controllable, but taking the call, I would say, is often better than not.
Yeah, just remember, we are people. We're just like you, and we, talking to us on background or off the record will help foster a relationship, and it might be fruitful, further down the line. So just keep that in mind. And also, please be patient with us. I don't know about you two, but I have like 25,000 unread emails in my inbox right now. I'm not an inbox zero. I tried so hard to be inbox zero for so long, and just can't. It doesn't work. So email me more than once if I don't respond. You're not bothering me. Like, I'm just being, disorganized, and I will get back to you. I promise.
Yeah, I think saying something is off the record is like the most powerful thing I've learned in marketing. But yeah, I think the takeaway that I'm hearing from here is like, as for those of us that are in the industry, builders in the space, like, we all understand business development. We all understand the power of taking not every single, but taking a lot of meetings and this having conversations. And I think it's good to be reminded that that's a practice that we should be taking with our journalists and the media as well. And to your point that y'all are just people. Look at you sitting here. And I'm getting the little red reminder. But yeah, so and actually, I just want to remind folks, if you have any questions, there's two here, but I think we'll skip these ones. If you have any questions, I think there's a QR code somewhere, you can submit them. But yeah, I mean, before we close out here, what is the best way for people to reach out to you? Like, you're going to be in the crowd here. Like, is a cold call the way to go? Like, no, you're shaking your head already. Like, don't do that. Inbox is full.
The editors always love to say pick up the phone, but like journalists these days anyway hate the phone. I think I find most of the time. I'm personally not somebody who does calls that often. But there is like a degree of actually like cyber hygiene that is going on at the minute, especially in the current environment with the way in which tech networks are developing. And so platforms like Telegram, which are really popular in crypto that we used to think of as like very safe encrypted apps, it's kind of been proven that's no longer the case. And so if you're looking for secure ways to speak to journalists, it's often best to ask them directly, but at least at Bloomberg, the methods that we prefer are things like WhatsApp and iMessage, because actually those are very heavily protected by the institutions that offer those platforms. I don't know about you guys.
Yeah, yes, phone calls make me scared that my data's been leaked. I would say, yes, preferred is email, Twitter, texting, yes.
Oh, Twitter, interesting.
Yeah, emails
Twitter.
are often like, they're more secure than you think as well, because it's then up to the outlet who manages that email, so whether or not those kinds of things can ever be shown to anybody outside the institution. And at Bloomberg anyway, our legal team defends the email content with like everything it's got. And so actually, if you own a Bloomberg terminal, which is not many people, but if you do, that's actually a really secure way to talk to people.
I love to talk on the phone and get coffee. I just, don't want a cold call in the middle of my workday, that's all. And, especially if it's something I'm not interested in, then I have to figure out how to politely decline. I think that an email, a message on, X, if you have my cell phone number or a text message, those all work really well. And then we can set up a time to talk, in depth at a later time. Yeah.
Amazing. Well, thank you. And follow these folks on Twitter, DM them, get your stories told. And yeah, can we have a round of applause for wonderful panelists? And I'll hand it back to Ellen.